All right, this is part 2 of Who Was Walt Disney? We are on chapter 5. If you missed the first part, look for part 1. Part 5 is called Hollywood, or chapter 5, sorry, is called Hollywood. After World War I, Hollywood became home to film studios such as Universal, Paramount, Warner Brothers, and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM. Movies were now a big business. In August of 1923, Walt packed a cardboard suitcase with his clothes and drawing materials. He bought a train ticket to California, where his older brother Roy was already living. Walt moved in with an uncle, paying a few dollars a month for room and board. Walt had big dreams for himself, but he certainly didn't look like much of a success. He was stick thin and wore shabby clothing. He spiffed himself up as best he could and went to every movie studio in town. Nobody offered him a job. So he went back to his old idea of making and selling cartoons. In October, he finally got a break. A woman named Margaret Winkler saw and liked what Walt had done in Alice's Wonderland. She agreed to pay Walt for a series of Alice cartoons, which she would sell to theaters. This was terrific news, except for one thing. Walt had only 3 months to make a new film. His young actress, Virginia Davis, still lived in Kansas City. Also, Walt needed money to make the movie. He didn't even have a movie camera. Remember, he had to sell it, much less a studio or artist to work with him. Walt turned to his brother Roy for help. Roy was 8 years older than Walt. Unlike Walt, Roy was practical. He had a good head for business, so the two formed the Disney Brothers Studio. With a loan from their uncle and some money from their parents, Walt and Roy set up shop in a small office on Kingswell Avenue. Walt bought himself a movie camera and he persuaded Virginia Davis and her family to move to Hollywood. At first, Walt did all the creative work in the studio. He thought up the story for each of the Alice movies. He directed his child star. He drew all the cartoon characters and put the live action and animation together. He worked so hard that his first film was finished ahead of schedule. But making a whole series of Alice films was too much work for one man, so Walt hired 3 men to operate the cameras and help with the animation. He also hired 3 women to ink and paint the black and white cartoon drawings. One of the young women, let's look at some pictures first. There's Roy and Walt. And then this is Lillian Bounds, who we're about to learn about. One young woman was small and pretty with dark hair. Her name was Lillian Bounds. Walt also worried that his own drawings were not good enough. He wanted his cartoon films to be the best in the business, so he got in touch with Ub E. Works. Walt convinced Ub to move out to California and join the Disney studio. Ub was talented and fast. He could produce great drawings in no time. Over the years, Ub did more and more of the drawing while Walt focused on thinking up the stories and directing. Together, they created a new character named Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and started making a series of Oswald cartoons. It was a smart decision. Oswald was a hit. The studio began selling cartoons on a regular basis. Business was so good, in fact, that Walt and Roy moved to bigger offices on Hyperion Avenue, and Walt changed the name of the company. Instead of Disney Brothers Studio, he wanted to call it Walt Disney Studios. Did Roy mind? It seems that he didn't. All Roy said was, if that's the way you want it, it was okay with him. After all, Walt was the one making the cartoons. Walt was under a lot of pressure now. He had to make lots of Oswald cartoons and do it quickly. He became short-tempered and irritable. He took his worries out on his employees. Some quit because they couldn't stand his insulting remarks. Walt could make you feel real bad when he wanted to, one of them said. Then something really nasty happened, something Walt never expected and didn't deserve. A man named Charlie Mintz, whose company was buying Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons, hired away most of Walt's artists. Mintz decided he didn't need Walt anymore. With Walt's own artists, he could make and sell Oswald cartoons without Walt Disney Studios. What Charlie Mintz did wasn't actually against the law, but it was still wrong. Walt was so upset that he couldn't eat or sleep. Not only had he lost Oswald, but he had been double-crossed. The only way he could save his business was to create another cartoon character, an even better one than Oswald. Walt worked like mad on a new idea and kept it secret. Only a few people, Ub, who did the drawing, Roy, who was always loyal to his brother, and Lillian, who inked drawings, knew about the new character. The new character was going to be a mouse. Here's our picture for chapter 6. A mouse named Mickey. Lillian Bounds was from Idaho. She had moved to Hollywood in 1923. She was 26 years old. Her boss, Walt, liked her spunky nature. Her short bobbed hair bounced when she laughed. Often Walt would give Lillian a ride home after work. He was very proud of the new car he had bought, a Ford Roadster. The two got to know each other on those rides. Finally, Walt asked Lillian out on a date. He even said he'd buy himself a new suit for the occasion. Lillian agreed, and Walt went shopping. Confident as he often seemed, he was shy around girls. In fact, he was 22 and still hadn't had a serious girlfriend. Walt showed up at Lillian's door dressed in a gray-green double-breasted suit holding theater tickets. Lillian was charmed and off they went. On July 13th, 1925, Walt and Lillian were married. They spent their honeymoon at Mount Rainier. On their wedding night, Walt had such a bad toothache that he couldn't sleep. To take his mind off the pain, he left their room and helped a porter shine shoes all night. The next morning, he went to a dentist and had his teeth pulled. It certainly wasn't the most fun way to start off a marriage, but Walt had a good story to tell. Lillian quit her job at the studio, but staying home was lonely. Walt spent such long hours at work. In later years, sometimes after dinner, Lillian would go back to the studio with Walt and go to sleep on the sofa while he kept working. For Christmas, Walt decided to find company for Lillian. He wrapped a big hat box with a ribbon and presented it to her on Christmas morning. Expecting a hat, Lillian opened the box and out popped a furry orange puppy. She named it Sunny. Soon Sunny went everywhere with her. As for Walt, he was just as crazy about Sunny as Lillian was. Every night, Walt would tell Lillian how his new cartoon character was coming along. One story is that the mouse was first named Mortimer, but Lillian didn't like the name. Mortimer sounded too fancy. Instead, she suggested Mickey. No one can be sure if this story is exactly true. Walt often stretched the truth to make a story more interesting. But one way or another, the new cartoon character got the name Mickey Mouse. He was skinny on stick legs, a long tail, and a sharp face. He didn't look that much like the Mickey Mouse everyone knows today. He also wasn't as nice. Early cartoons starring Mickey Mouse often showed him playing mean tricks on other characters. As Mickey became everybody's hero, Disney saw how he needed another character that was naughty, greedy, and rude in a funny way, and that character was Donald Duck. Like most movies and cartoons at the time, the first Mickey Mouse cartoon, called Plane Crazy, was silent and in black and white. In Plane Crazy, Mickey was a daredevil pilot who tries to impress his girlfriend, Minnie. The cartoon character came out not long after Charles Lindbergh became the first person to fly across the Atlantic. So there's Mickey, and that's what Charles Lindbergh looked like. Mickey Mouse is so hugely popular today that it's hard to believe that Walt had no luck selling his first two Disney cartoons. But it's true. No theater wanted to show Walt's mouse cartoons. Never one to give up, Walt asked himself what would make Mickey more exciting. His answer was sound. The first movie with sound came out in 1927. It was called The Jazz Singer and starred a popular actor named Al Jolson. But as of yet, there had never been a cartoon with sound. If Walt could do that, it would certainly grab the attention of audiences. In Steamboat Willie, Mickey Mouse whistles. His girlfriend Minnie says, "Yoo-hoo!" There was also music and other sound effects like doors slamming. Steamboat Willie was by far the best sound cartoon of its time. The manager of the Colony Theater in New York City agreed to show it, and audience loved it. Soon other theaters started showing it. Walt quickly added soundtracks to his two earlier Mickey cartoons and now was able to sell them to theaters as well. For later cartoons, Walt recorded himself doing the voices of both Mickey and Minnie. Now something was really surprising happened. A manager of a theater in Ocean Park, California, came up with a great gimmick. He invited kids to come to his theater and watch hours and hours of Mickey Mouse cartoons. All the kids who showed up became members of a club called the Mickey Mouse Club. There were pie eating contests and marble tournaments for club members. Look at all those kids. Walt visited the theater one afternoon and watched 1,000 Mickey Mouse Club members screaming for their cartoon hero. Walt decided to start more clubs in other cities. Mickey Mouse Clubs started to spring up all over America. At their meetings, kids recited the Mickey Mouse Club pledge. Mickey Mice do not swear, smoke, cheat, or lie. There was also a special club song. The Mickey Mouse Clubs made Mickey Mouse cartoons even more popular, and the cartoons made even more kids want to join the Mickey Mouse Club. Soon, a Mickey Mouse cartoon script drawn up by Works appeared in 40 newspapers around the country. Kids went crazy buying Mickey Mouse dolls, buttons, pencils, toothbrushes, and books. Walt had done something new, something big, just as he always hoped he would. And it was just the beginning. Chapter 7, Ups and Downs. Walt Disney was on top of the world when trouble hit the studio again. A dishonest distributor wanted control of Mickey Mouse. Walt had lost Oswald. He was not going to let Mickey Mouse get away. Roy worked out a deal so that the Disneys kept ownership of Mickey. The distributor, however, did manage to hire away Ub Iwerks. Why did Ub Iwerks leave? Ub said that Walt always was complaining about the work Ub did, and Walt liked to take all the credit for Disney cartoons. According to Ub, Walt couldn't even draw a proper Mickey Mouse. Okay, there's a picture of a little boy. One time, a boy begged Walt for a drawing of Mickey with Walt's autograph. Walt asked Ub to draw it, and then Walt would sign it. Ub got so mad that he told Walt to draw it himself and stomped off. Losing Ub was hard. Walt was angry and hurt, but he hired new animators to join his team. They quickly realized that Walt was the most important man in the studio, even if he didn't do the drawing. He chose what cartoons to make. He worked on the story development and artwork. He made all the final decisions. If the new animators didn't like it, they had to keep quiet or quit. In the early 1930s, Walt Disney Studios produced many short cartoons called Silly Symphonies. As always, Walt wanted to do something new. Three Little Pigs had much more of a plot. The story of the pigs and the hungry wolf come from the Green Fairy book by Andrew Lang. It was Walt's idea to put in a song. It was called Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Pig? People came out of the theater whistling the peppy tune. The song seemed to cheer people up. Three Little Pigs came out in 1933. Many people needed cheering up. It was a time called the Great Depression. Thousands of companies had gone out of business. Millions of workers lost their job. People lost their homes. Fewer families had money to spend on extras like going to the movie theaters. But Walt Disney Studios was doing fine. By 1930, a company called Technicolor was producing good color films for movies. Walt is said to have shouted, "At last, we can show a rainbow on the screen." Walt's Flowers and Trees, about two trees who fall in love, was the first cartoon in full color. It won an Academy Award. Everyone at Disney worked long hours, but nobody worked harder than Walt. He drove himself to the point of collapse. He was exhausted and more moody than ever. He was also upset because he and Lillian were having trouble having children. Walt worried that he might never be a father. He couldn't sleep at night. He often cried. He became so sick that his doctor insisted he take a vacation to recover from the stress. In the fall of 1931, Walt and Lillian took a train all across the country to Washington, D.C. Being on a train was always relaxing and fun for Walt. They took a boat trip through the Panama Canal. He and Lillian lounged on deck chairs and had romantic dinners. When the Disneys returned home, Walt took up sports to ease stress: ice skating, swimming, horseback riding, and polo. In 1933, Lillian became pregnant. Walt was thrilled. He wrote his family all about the pink and blue baby items in the nursery. On December 18th, a healthy baby girl was born, Diane Marie Disney. Lillian could not have any more children after Diane, so in 1937, the Disneys adopted a baby girl and named her Sharon May. Walt did everything he could to give his daughters a happy home life. He always had a movie camera in his hand to record family fun. He read to his girls, took them on outings, and acted out stories for them. He took them bike riding at the studio. He even bought them a giant playhouse that was made for Snow White. As for fancy Hollywood parties, Walt had no interest in them. He liked staying home and eating chili and beans on crackers. Roy and his wife and son lived nearby. The two families saw a lot of each other. Walt's parents, however, were still living far away in Portland, Oregon, so Walt and Roy decided to buy a house in California for them. The Disneys could all get together in the backyard for barbecues. The house was a wonderful gift meant to bring joy. Instead, it brought terrible sorrow. There was something wrong with the heating system. Suddenly, one day in 1938, Elias and Flora became sick from breathing in poisonous gas that was leaking. Elias recovered, but sadly, Flora died. Walt was so upset for the rest of his life, he refused to talk about his mother's death.